right. So you're thinking about checking out this graphic novel for Neil Gaiman's Neverwhere.
Yeah, it's a pretty popular one. Lots of folks curious about it.
For sure. And we've been looking into it, you know, digging through what the reviews say.
Definitely want to know if it's worth the time, especially if you're a Gaiman fan.
Absolutely. So, like, if you're into American Gods, Ocean at the End of the Lane, that kind of stuff.
Urban fantasy, that whole vibe.
Exactly. We're going to let you know if the graphic novel is worth adding to your reading list.
We'll give you the rundown in about 9 minutes.
Perfect. So,
Right.
to jump right in, what's the verdict?
Well, here's the thing. It's a good adaptation. Visually, it's really striking, but
But. There's a but coming. I can feel it.
it might leave you a little, I don't know, wanting more. If you really love the depth and the nuances of Gaiman's original novel, the graphic novel might not hit the same way.
Okay, so not a complete slam dunk.
Not quite.
For those of us who are really into Gaiman's writing style,
Oh.
that's a bit of a red flag. What exactly is working and what isn't?
Well, the adapter, Mike Carey, he did a good job streamlining the story.
Streamlining.
Yeah, to fit the graphic novel format, of course.
Okay.
And actually, there are reviewers on Goodreads like Lauren and Eltapis de Fionavar. They felt like he still really captured the essence of Neverwhere.
Oh, that's good.
You still get that journey into London below, with Richard.
Yeah.
The humor's there, the world building that Gaiman's known for, it's all there.
Okay, good. But streamlining, that makes me a little nervous.
How so?
Doesn't that mean they cut stuff out? Like, how much is actually missing?
It's definitely a faster-paced experience, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Compared to the novel, I mean. One Goodreads reviewer, Alba Traver, pointed out that some characters and subplots, they're just gone.
Oh, no?
Think of it as like a condensed version.
A condensed version.
Yeah, hitting those main plot points and showcasing the key characters,
All right. I guess that makes sense. But what about the humor? Gaiman's wit is so subtle and layered. Can they really translate that into a visual format?
It's a good question, and to be honest, that's one area where the graphic novel doesn't quite hit the mark.
I knew it.
One reviewer, Algernon, he goes by Darth Inyan on Goodreads, he said some of the jokes and the wordplay, they just kind of fall flat.
Oh, that's too bad.
Yeah.
That's like trying to squeeze a whole symphony into a 3-minute pop song.
Yeah.
You're going to lose some of the richness and complexity.
Exactly. You just can't capture it all.
Right. So, okay, we've talked story, but what about the artwork itself?
The artwork. Now things get interesting and a bit divisive, honestly.
Ooh, I've heard mixed things about the art. Some people love it, others not so much.
You got it. There are reviewers on Goodreads like Michael and R.J. Royer. They absolutely loved the art.
Okay, so there are fans?
They were calling it beautiful, amazing, that kind of stuff. They especially liked how Glenn Fabry, the artist, brought characters like Mr. Croup and Mr. Vandemar to life. He has a very unique style, they said.
Okay, so visually appealing, at least to some, but there's the other side of the coin, right? Something about the representation of certain characters.
Right, unfortunately. There were some criticisms, yeah. One reviewer, Julia, she felt like the way the Marquis de Carabas was portrayed,
Yeah.
she felt it was kind of borderline, like a harmful caricature,
Yikes. Yeah, I can see why that would be a concern.
Especially since in the novel, his ethnicity is a little ambiguous.
Right. Artistic interpretation can be subjective, of course.
Definitely.
But there's a line between stylistic choices and, potentially offensive imagery.
Absolutely, and it's important to acknowledge those concerns. Julia wasn't the only one who felt that way either. Sumit Singla and another reviewer echoed similar things. They said the visuals for certain characters just didn't match their descriptions in the book.
Interesting. Can you give an example?
Sure. Some felt like Dor, that powerful young woman.
Right.
They felt like she was drawn in a way that was, overly sexualized.
I see.
And that it just didn't fit her character.
Wow, okay. That's definitely something to think about. So overall, the art is a bit of a mixed bag then.
For sure. Some people find it striking and unique. Others find it problematic. It really seems to depend on your own background with the novel and how you interpret Gaiman's intentions, I think.
So even though Gaiman himself approved the adaptation,
Apparently so, yeah.
the visual interpretation is where things get a little shaky.
You could say that.
Is there anything the graphic novel offers that the Neverwhere novel doesn't? Any reason for a diehard fan to check it out?
Well, there's one thing. One Goodreads reviewer, Mario, he pointed out that there are actually a few new scenes in the graphic novel, stuff that wasn't in the original book.
Oh, really? So maybe, for those hardcore Neverwhere fans, There is a little something extra to discover.
Possibly. It could be fun to revisit the world and see it through a slightly different lens, yeah.
New scenes, huh?
Yeah.
I'd be curious to see how they fit into the whole story. But I don't know, I'm still a little hesitant about the whole thing. I really loved the novel. It's got that, I don't know, atmosphere, almost like lyrical, you know? Does the graphic novel even come close to capturing that feeling?
That's the big question, right? And honestly, it's where the graphic novel kind of falls short.
Yeah.
Like we were talking about before, they sacrifice some of that depth and the nuance to make it work as a graphic novel for the pacing and the visuals and all that.
Right, right. Makes sense. It's almost like comparing like a gourmet meal to a quick sandwich.
Ah, I like that.
You're still getting the flavor, but it's not the whole like, five-star experience.
Yeah, exactly. But it's important to remember adaptations aren't about replacing the original, right?
Right.
It's more like offering a different perspective, another way to revisit something you love, but through a new lens.
Okay, yeah, I could see that. Kind of like when you watch a movie adaptation of a book you love.
Mm,
It's never going to be exactly the same, but it can still be enjoyable on its own.
right, and think about it this way. The graphic novel format, it might actually be a better way for new readers to get into Neverwhere,
Oh, interesting.
especially people who are more into visual storytelling.
That's true. Sometimes having those visuals can help ground a story, especially one as fantastical as Neverwhere.
For sure.
It could make it less intimidating,
Yeah.
for someone who's not used to Gaiman's writing style.
Exactly. It's like a way to get a taste of the world, the characters, before diving into the novel.
That's like a gateway drug to
Yeah.
full-blown Neverwhere addiction.
You could say that. But speaking of other Gaiman adaptations, it's worth pointing out that this one isn't quite as universally loved as, say, the Sandman graphic novel.
Oh, The Sandman. Now, those are phenomenal.
Right.
I actually prefer the graphic novels to the audio dramas.
Oh, interesting.
The artwork is just so stunning
Yeah.
and evocative. It adds so much to the story.
You're so right. The Sandman is a great example of an adaptation that really elevates the source material. Like the art style, it just fits so perfectly with Gaiman's writing. It creates this totally immersive experience.
Okay, so maybe the Neverwhere graphic novel isn't quite on that level,
Yeah, probably not.
but is it still worth checking out, even with all these reservations about the artwork we've been discussing?
Well, it depends what you're looking for, really. If you're a diehard Neverwhere fan and you're expecting an adaptation that captures every little nuance, you're probably going to be disappointed.
Yeah, that makes sense. It sounds like the graphic novel is more of a companion piece then, a different way to experience the story.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to put it. Not a replacement for the original by any means.
Definitely. And, those issues with the artwork, those are still something to keep in mind.
Oh, absolutely. Some praise Fabry's style, but others, they find it really problematic, especially the way certain characters are depicted.
Right, right. Can't overlook that. It's kind of a shame because it sounds like the adaptation itself has some merit. But those artistic choices, for some people, they could be a deal breaker.
Definitely. It's a valid concern, and ultimately, each reader has to decide for themselves.
Okay, so for our listener who's still on the fence, what's the final verdict? Should they or shouldn't they spend their time on this graphic novel? So, okay, after all that back and forth, give it to me straight. Should I add this graphic novel to my to-read list, or is it a pass?
If you're looking for a quick, visually driven way to experience Neverwhere, maybe as an introduction, or, a refresher if you've read the novel before, then yeah, it's worth checking out.
Okay, so not a hard no.
Exactly. But definitely go into it knowing that it's a condensed, streamlined version of the story. We talked about that.
Right, right. Condensed, streamlined, and I'm definitely keeping those criticisms of the artwork in mind too.
Good. Ultimately, it's your call. But this whole conversation, it kind of makes you think about adaptations in general, doesn't it?
Oh yeah, for sure. Like,
Yeah.
when does a visual interpretation actually, add to the story, and when does it, maybe take away from it?
Exactly. The Sandman, for example, those graphic novels, they really enhance Gaiman's work. Beautiful, right?
Totally.
But in this case, with the Neverwhere graphic novel, it sounds like the artwork might not have captured the essence of the characters the way some readers were hoping.
Right. It's so subjective, isn't it?
Totally. It makes you wonder, do we always need a visual representation to really appreciate a story?
That's such a great point. Sometimes just letting your imagination run wild with the author's descriptions, that can be just as powerful, if not more so.
Oh, I agree. There's definitely a magic to that, creating your own mental images. But at the same time, visual adaptations can also help us discover new perspectives, new interpretations.
Yeah, that's true. And they can definitely spark new conversations and debates. Kind of like the one we're having now.
Exactly. So even if the Neverwhere graphic novel isn't perfect, it still has the potential to make us think differently about storytelling and how it works across mediums.
Totally. Well said.
Hmm.
So, listeners, if you're curious about the graphic novel, go explore. But be aware of its limitations.
And don't be afraid to form your own opinions about how the visual interpretation affects your experience of the story.
Happy reading, everyone.
Everyone.